They were the most feared species in the entire galaxy. They had been feared for 3,000 years. Every species knew their name. Every species trembled when they heard it. They looked like giant cats that walked on two legs. They stood 8 feet tall. Their fur was black like the space between stars. Their eyes glowed amber in the dark. They had claws that could cut through metal. Their teeth were sharp like knives. When a smiled, it was not friendly. It was a warning. For 3,000 years they had conquered planets. They had won every war. They had never lost a single battle. Other species would surrender just by seeing a warship appear in their sky. Nobody wanted to fight them. Nobody wanted to make them angry. They liked it this way. On their home planet Prime, the warriors trained their children from a very young age. The children were called cubs. The cubs learned how to fight. They learned how to hunt. They learned how to be scary. But the most important thing they learned was the predator stare. The predator stare was a sacred tradition. It was a special look that all warriors had to master. When they used the predator stare, their amber eyes would lock onto their target. They would not blink. They would not move. They would stare with such intensity that the target would feel like prey. Small creatures often fainted. Some forgot how to breathe. A few had heart attacks just from being stared at. The predator stare had ended wars without a single weapon being fired. It was the greatest tool. On a warm morning on Prime, Elder walked slowly across the training grounds. Was old now. His black fur had streaks of gray. His left eye was from an ancient battle, but he still walked with the pride of a warrior. He had trained hundreds of cubs in his lifetime. He had seen many generations grow into fierce fighters. Today, he was watching the generation. 12 cubs stood in a line on the red sand of the training ground. They were young, barely past their second molt. This meant they had just shed their baby fur and grown their adult coats. Their eyes had just started to glow. They were still small compared to adult, only 6 feet tall, but they were growing fast. The cub's instructor was warrior, was in his prime. His muscles rippled under his black fur. His claws were always sharp. He had killed many enemies in battle. Now his job was to train these cubs to be just as deadly. Again, commanded. His voice was deep and rough. The 12 cubs faced forward. They widened their eyes. They stopped blinking. They tried to make their stare as scary as possible. Walked slowly in front of them. He examined each cub carefully. He stopped in front of a young female named Bora. She was the most promising cub in the group. Her black fur was perfectly smooth. Her amber eyes burned bright. She held her predator stare without moving a single muscle. Counted silently. 45 seconds, 46, 47. Bora blinked. 47 seconds, announced. Better than last time, but not good enough. A true warrior can hold the stare for 5 minutes. Bora lowered her head in shame. I will do better, instructor. Next to her, her brother straightened his back. He was determined to beat his sister, was slightly bigger than Bora. He thought this made him better. Their rivalry pushed both of them to train harder. Move to, show me. Locked his eyes forward. He stared at a point in the distance. He did not blink. He did not breathe. His entire body became still like a statue. Counted 48, 49, 50, 51. Blinked. 51 seconds, said. There was a tiny hint of approval in his voice. Acceptable. Tried not to smile. Smiling was weakness, but inside he felt proud. Elder walked closer. The cubs all stood, was a legend. Having him watch their training was a great honor. These cubs show promise, said Tu. His voice was slow and heavy with age. They are improving every day, agreed. They will be ready. They must be ready, said firmly. Next cycle they will board the diplomatic vessel. They will travel to the Galactic Council's neutral station. They will represent all. The cubs felt a wave of excitement and fear. The Galactic Council, the neutral station called Harmony's Rest. It was where species from 47 different worlds came together. It was where the most important meetings in the galaxy happened. Continued speaking. A new species has recently joined the Galactic Council. They call themselves humans. They come from a small blue planet called Earth. They are weak. They are small. They have no claws. They have no fangs. They have soft skin that tears easily. Some of the cubs exchanged glances. This species sounded pathetic. But raised one clawed finger. We must still show them their place. They must learn to fear just as all other species fear us. When they see our cubs displaying the predator stare, they will understand. They will know that even our children are more terrifying than their greatest warriors. Nodded seriously. You hear, elder cubs, this is your mission. You will be the first these humans ever see. You will shape their understanding of our species. You will make them afraid. Yes, instructor, the 12 cubs shouted together. Young Bora felt determination burn in her chest. She would master the predator stare. She would make these humans tremble. She would make Elder proud. She would make Olive proud. That night Bora practiced in her sleeping quarters. She stared at her reflection in the polished metal wall. She counted the seconds, 48, 49, 50. Her eyes began to water. She forced them to stay open. 51, 52, 53. She blinked. Water ran down her furry cheeks. 53 seconds, she whispered to herself. Tomorrow I will do better. In the quarters next to hers was doing the same thing. He reached 55 seconds before blinking. He smiled in the darkness. He would beat his sister. He would be the best. All 12 cubs practiced late into the night. They practiced the next day. They practiced every day for the next 3 weeks. Slowly, their stares grew longer and more intense. Bora reached 1 minute, then 1 minute and 30 seconds, stayed just slightly ahead of her. The other cubs improved too. Young learned to add a low growl to her stare, making it even scarier. A cub named discovered he could make his eyes glow brighter by focusing his anger. Each cub found their own special way to be terrifying. Instructor watched them with growing pride. These cubs would do well. These cubs would bring honor to the... Finally, the day came. The diplomatic vessel was ready. The 12 cubs boarded the ship in their ceremonial armor. The armor was black and silver, polished until it reflected like mirrors. They looked like tiny warriors. They looked deadly. Elder boarded with them. He would lead the delegation. He would present the cubs to the humans and to the entire Galactic Council. As the ship lifted off from Prime, Bora pressed her face against the window. She watched her home planet grow smaller. She felt nervous. She felt excited. She felt ready. Soon she would meet her first humans. Soon she would show them the predator stare. Soon they would learn to fear her. None of the cubs knew what was waiting for them. None of them understood what humans really were. None of them were prepared for a 7-year-old girl named. The ship jumped into faster-than-light travel. The stars stretched into lines, and the cubs practiced their stares one more time. They had no idea their scary image was about to be destroyed forever. The neutral station called Harmony's Rest floated in the empty space between 3 star systems. It was massive. It was shaped like a giant wheel that slowly spun to create gravity. Lights glowed from thousands of windows. Ships from dozens of different species flew in and out of its docking bays. It was the center of galactic diplomacy. It was where peace was made and wars were prevented. The diplomatic vessel approached the station slowly. Inside, Elder stood at the front viewing window. Behind him, the 12 cubs stood in perfect formation. They wore their ceremonial armor. Their fur was brushed until it shined. Their eyes glowed amber in the dim light of the ship. "Remember your training," said without turning around. "When those airlock doors open, you will be the first thing they see. You will walk forward with pride. You will display the predator stare. You will show no weakness." "Yes, Elder," the cubs responded together. Bora stood at the very front of the formation. This was an honor. It meant Instructor believed she was the best. She felt proud. She also felt very nervous. Her heart was beating fast under her armor, but she kept her face still. She showed nothing. Stood just behind his sister. He was a little bit jealous that she got the front position, but he told himself it did not matter. He would make his stare the most terrifying. Everyone would remember him. The ship docked with a soft thud. The cubs heard the sound of metal connecting to metal. Air hissed as the pressure balanced. Then there was silence. "It is time," announced. He straightened his own ceremonial robes. He was not wearing armor. He was too old for that, but his presence was powerful enough. "Walk with me." The airlock doors slid open with a smooth sound. The diplomatic hall of Harmony's Rest was enormous. The ceiling was so high it looked like a sky. Lights floated in the air like artificial stars. The floor was made of white stone that had been polished until it reflected everything like a mirror. Delegations from many different species lined both sides of the hall. They had all come to witness the arrival. Walked forward first. His steps were slow and heavy. Each footstep echoed through the silent hall. Behind him, the 12 cubs marched in perfect formation. Their armor clinked softly with each step. Their eyes were already locked into the predator's stare. The effect was immediate. A delegation of small blue creatures with big eyes pressed themselves against the wall. Their leader actually fainted and had to be caught by his assistants. The tall insect-like beings clicked their mandibles nervously and looked away. A group of beings made of living crystal dimmed their inner lights in submission. Bora felt a surge of pride. The training was working. Everyone was scared. This was what it meant to be. But then she noticed the human delegation. They stood near the center of the hall. There were 5 of them. They were short compared to the barely reaching 5 to 6 feet tall. They had no fur, just strange, thin threads growing from their heads in different colors. Their eyes did not glow. Their skin looked soft and fragile. They had no claws. They had no fangs. They looked completely helpless. The leader of the human delegation was a female named Ambassador Jinnah. She had black hair tied behind her head. She wore formal clothing in dark blue. She stood straight and showed no fear. This was slightly surprising. Most species cowered when they first saw the. But what caught Bora's attention was the small human standing next to the ambassador. It was a human child, a female child, even smaller than the adults. She looked about 7 years old in human counting. She had short black hair that was messy and uneven. She wore colorful clothing with pictures of strange creatures on it. Her eyes were wide and bright with curiosity. This was Ambassador Jinnah's daughter. Had begged her mother to bring her on this diplomatic trip. She had called it a boring space trip, but secretly she was very excited. She wanted to see aliens. She wanted to see spaceships. She wanted to see everything. And now she was seeing the. The cubs continued their march forward. Their eyes glowed. Their stares were perfect. Other species trembled and looked away. They were showing their dominance. They were showing their power. Tilted her head. She looked at the cubs with their black fur and glowing eyes. She saw their pointed ears and their long tails. She saw their little paws and their cute noses. Something happened in her brain. Something her mother would later describe as a complete malfunction. "Kittis!" screamed at the top of her lungs. The word echoed through the silent diplomatic hall like a bomb explosion. Every head turned toward the small human girl. Every eye widened. Did she just call the terrifying warriors kitties? But was not done. Her eyes had locked onto young Bora at the front of the formation. Bora was mid-predator stare, her amber eyes blazing with carefully practiced menace, but did not see a predator. Saw the fluffiest, most huggable creature she had ever seen in her entire life. "Fluffy kitty!" screamed again. And then she ran. Ambassador Jinnah's hand shot out to grab her daughter, but she was too slow, was already sprinting across the polished floor. Her small feet slapped against the stone. Her arms were stretched wide open for a hug. "No," Jinnah shouted. But it was too late. Crashed directly into Bora's chest. Her small arms wrapped around the young's neck. She squeezed tight, her face pressed into Bora's black fur. "You're so soft," squealed with pure happiness. "You're the softest thing ever." Bora froze. Her predator's stare shattered into a million pieces. Her carefully trained face showed pure shock. Her amber eyes were wide with confusion. Her mouth hung open. A human, a tiny human, was hugging her, was squeezing her, was pressing a warm little face into her fur. Bora had been trained to fight. She had been trained to kill. She had been trained to terrify. But nobody had trained her for this. Nobody had told her what to do when a small creature attacked with affection instead of weapons. "So fluffy, so fluffy, so fluffy," kept repeating. Her small fingers dug into Bora's fur, scratching and rubbing. Then's fingers found the spot behind Bora's ear. She started scratching. Something terrible happened. Something that made Elder's heart nearly stop. Something that made Instructor, watching from the ship's cameras, drop to his knees in horror. Bora started to purr. The sound was low and deep. It rumbled from her chest like a small engine. It was a sound that no warrior should ever make in public. It was the sound of complete comfort, complete happiness, complete submission. The diplomatic hall fell into absolute silence. The silence was so heavy it felt like it had physical weight. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Nobody could believe what they were witnessing. The most terrifying species in the galaxy, their carefully trained cub, their future warrior, being snuggled into a purring puddle by a 7-year-old human girl. Stared at his sister, his jaw hung open, his predator stare was completely forgotten. "Bora," he whispered in horror. Bora could not respond. Her eyes had closed. Her head had tilted to give better access to the scratching spot. The purr grew louder. "This one is my favorite," announced happily, still hugging Bora. Then she turned her head and saw the other 11 cubs standing frozen in shock. Her eyes went even wider. "There's more kitties." Elder knew in that moment that everything was about to get much worse. He was right. Elder watched in horror as his carefully trained cubs fell one by one. It started with Bora. The young cub was completely lost in the human child's embrace. Her eyes were closed. Her purr filled the silent hall. Her tail, which should have been held straight and proud, was now swaying gently back and forth like she was dreaming of happy things. Had seen many terrible things in his long life. He had seen battles where thousands died. He had seen planets burn. He had seen warriors fall in combat, but nothing had prepared him for this. This was worse than any defeat. This was the complete destruction of dignity. Pulled back from Bora just slightly, she looked at the purring cub with the biggest smile on her small face. "You're my new best friend," she declared. Then her eyes moved to the other 11 cubs who were still standing frozen in shock. "More fluffy friends," shouted with joy. She released Bora, who immediately made a small sad sound at losing the warm contact, then ran toward. Saw her coming. His warrior instincts kicked in. He tried to activate his predator stare. He tried to make his eyes glow brighter. He tried to bare his teeth in a scary way. Stopped in front of him. She looked up at his face. She saw his glowing eyes and his sharp teeth. "You're even fluffier," she screamed with delight. Before could react, she grabbed his paw with both of her tiny hands. His claws were out, sharp and deadly. Each claw could cut through steel. Each claw had been sharpened that very morning. Held his paw like it was a teddy bear's hand. "Your fur is a different fluffy than your sister," said seriously, as if this was very important information. "Hers is smooth fluffy. Yours is poofy fluffy. I like both." Looked down at his deadly paw in the tiny human's grip. He looked at her small fingers wrapped around his killing tools. He felt her warm skin against his fur. She showed no fear. Zero fear. Not even a tiny bit. She looked at him like he was the most wonderful thing she had ever seen. Something strange happened in his chest. a feeling he had never felt before. It was warm, it was soft. It made him want to protect this small creature. It made him want to see her smile more. His predator's stare crumbled like sand in water. "Your eyes are so pretty," told him. "Like little lamps. Can you make them brighter? Can you turn them on and off?" Did not know what to say. No one had ever called his predator eyes pretty before. No one had ever asked him to make them brighter just because they liked looking at them. I can try," he heard himself say. His voice was soft. It was not the voice of a warrior. Behind them, Elder made a sound like he was choking, but had already moved on. She released paw and ran to the next cub, a young female named, was known for her fierce growl. She tried to use it now. She opened her mouth and let out the scariest sound she could make. Gasped, "You sound like a motor, do it again." Growled again, confused. "That's so cool," clapped her hands. "My mom's car makes that sound when it's cold outside. Can I feel it?" Before could understand what was happening, had pressed her small hand against throat. She felt the vibration of the growl through the fur. "It tickles," giggled. S growl died in her throat. She looked down at the small hand touching her neck. In any other situation, touching us throat was an act of war. It was a challenge. It meant you wanted to fight to the death. But this tiny creature was just feeling the vibrations and giggling. Something inside melted. Her fierce expression softened. Her ears, which had been flat against her head in aggression, slowly rose up. "You want more?" growl asked hesitantly. "Yes, please," beamed. Growled again, but softer this time, more like a purr than a threat, laughed and scratched Under's chin. Started purring too. "This cannot be happening," instructor said on the ship. He was watching everything through the cameras. His face was buried in his paws. Three cubs have fallen. But it was only the beginning. Moved through the formation like a small tornado of affection. She hugged and told him his ears were pointy in a good way. She squeezed Sara and declared her tail was the. She pet Young and discovered that his belly was extra round and nice for hugging. One by one, the cubs fell. Their predator stares disappeared. Their warrior postures relaxed. Their ears perked up. Their tails started wagging. Sounds of purring filled the diplomatic hall like a strange orchestra. The delegations from other species watched in complete disbelief. The who had fainted earlier had woken up, seen what was happening, and fainted again. They were clicking their mandibles in what might have been laughter. They had brightened their inner lights, fascinated by this display. Ambassador Jinnah stood frozen in place. Her mouth was open. Her diplomatic training had not prepared her for this either. "I am so sorry," she finally managed to say to Elder. She really likes animals. I mean, not that you're animals, I mean, I am so sorry." Could not respond. He was watching convince young Bora to lie down on the floor so she could use the cub's fluffy belly as a pillow. "This is the softest pillow in the whole universe," announced. She snuggled into Bora's stomach fur. Bora's purr grew even louder. Her tail wrapped around the small human protectively. Lay down next to his sister, immediately put her feet on his belly. "2 pillows," she said happily. Within 15 minutes, all 12 cubs were on the floor of the diplomatic hall. Some were lying on their backs, exposing their bellies for scratches. Some were curled around like protective walls. Some were just sitting close, waiting for their turn to be pet. Moved between them like a small queen in her fluffy kingdom. She gave each cub attention. She praised their softness. She commented on their different types of fluffiness. She named them things like Soft One and Poofy One and the one with the tail. "This one's tummy is making the loudest noise," said, pressing her ear against belly. Was purring so hard her whole body vibrated. Elder finally found his voice. It came out weak and broken. 3,000 years, he whispered. 3,000 years of reputation, destroyed in 15 minutes by a child. Ambassador Jinnah winced. I really am very sorry, she's usually better behaved. She just really, really likes cats. I mean creatures that look like cats. She gave up. She likes fluffy things. They are bonding, said an observer, their crystalline voice filled with wonder. I have never seen cubs allow touching before. This is remarkable. It is a disaster, corrected, but even he could not look away from the scene. Young Bora, his most promising warrior cub, was gently grooming messy hair with her tongue, was giggling and saying it tickled. Something was happening to the cubs, something that could not be undone. With every pet, every hug, every moment of warmth, they were being changed. And somewhere deep in Elder's ancient heart, in a place he had locked away centuries ago, something very small and very soft whispered that maybe this was not entirely bad. He crushed that thought immediately. But it came back. The news reached Prime within hours. The military high command called an emergency meeting. This had only happened 3 times in the last 500 years, once for a major war, once for a planet-killing asteroid, and now for this. The meeting room was deep underground beneath the capital city. The walls were made of solid stone. The table was carved from a single piece of black crystal. Around it sat the 12 highest ranking in existence. They were old. They were powerful. They had won hundreds of battles between them. At the head of the table sat Supreme Commander. He was the oldest alive, over 200 years old. His fur was almost completely gray. His eyes had faded from bright amber to pale gold. But his mind was still sharp, and his voice still commanded respect. "Show me," ordered. A holographic display appeared above the table. It showed the diplomatic hall of Harmony's Rest. It showed the moment the airlock opened. It showed the cubs marching forward in perfect formation. It showed their perfect predator stares. Then it showed the small human child running toward them. The military leaders watched in silence as crashed into Bora. They watched Bora's stare shatter. They watched her start purring. They watched the other cubs fall one by one. When the recording reached the part where all 12 cubs were lying on the floor being pet by a 7-year-old, Supreme Commander raised his paw. The recording stopped. "Explain," demanded. His voice was cold. "Explain how one small human neutralized 12 trained cubs." Nobody spoke. Nobody had an explanation. 3,000 years, continued. 3,000 years of building our reputation. 3,000 years of being feared across the galaxy. And in 15 minutes this child made us look like, he could not finish the sentence. "Like pets," one of the generals whispered. The word hung in the air like poison. Elder's face appeared on another holographic screen. He had stayed on Harmony's Rest with the cubs. He looked tired. He looked old. He looked defeated. Elder said, "You were there, what happened?" Shook his head slowly. "I do not fully understand it myself, Supreme Commander." The child showed no fear, none at all. She looked at our warriors and saw something cute. She wanted to touch them, to hug them, to show them affection. And the cubs could not resist this. They were not trained for it, admitted. We trained them to face enemies. We trained them to face fear. We trained them to face weapons and violence, but we never trained them to face. He struggled for the word, love. The word sounded strange in the military meeting room. It did not belong there. Supreme Commander turned to another screen. On it appeared a female wearing the white robes of a scientist. This was Scholar. She was the leading expert on alien species. She had studied thousands of different life forms across the galaxy. Scholar said, "You have examined the recordings. You have studied these humans. Give us your report." Bowed her head respectfully. Then she began speaking in her calm, scientific voice. "Humans are a young species. They have only had space travel for about 300 years. Their planet Earth is small and mostly covered in water. They are physically weak compared to most other species. They have no natural weapons. No claws, no fangs, no venom. Their skin tears easily. Their bones break easily. By all measures, they should have been eaten by predators long ago. But they survived, said. Yes, they survived by being social, very, very social. They form bonds with everything, with each other, with other animals, even with objects. They have a deep need for connection and affection. Pulled up images on the display. They showed humans with various earth creatures, humans hugging dogs, humans cuddling cats, humans petting horses, humans feeding birds from their hands. On there, humans did something unusual. Instead of fearing predators, they sometimes befriended them. They took wolves, deadly pack hunters, and over thousands of years turned them into dogs. They took wild cats, solitary killing machines, and turned them into house pets. They looked at dangerous creatures and thought, I want to be friends with that. The military leaders stared at the images in disbelief. Humans evolved alongside these predators, continued. They developed no instinctive fear response to carnivorous species. Instead, they developed something else. She paused. They developed affection responses. Affection responses, repeated. When humans see something with certain features, their brains release chemicals that create feelings of love and protectiveness. These features include large eyes, round faces, soft fur, and certain body proportions. We call this the cute response. Showed brain scans on the display. When the human child looked at our cubs, her brain identified them as cute, not dangerous, cute. Her brain flooded with chemicals that made her want to hug them, protect them, and love them. General, a warrior with one missing ear, spoke up. So she sees us as pets. Worse, said, she sees you as cute. And for humans, cute is the most powerful force in the universe. They will do anything for cute things. They will spend all their money. They will change their entire lives. They will even risk death. This was hard to believe. Risk death for cute things. Nodded. Humans have been documented running into burning buildings to save small animals. They have attacked much larger opponents to protect creatures they find cute. Their protective instincts toward cute things override their fear of danger. Supreme Commander processed this information. So the child was not attacking our cubs, she was protecting them, loving them. Yes, and here is the most concerning part. The expression grew serious. Human children are particularly dangerous. Adult humans have social training. They know that some behaviors are not appropriate, but children, especially young ones, have no such filters. They act purely on instinct. When she saw the cubs, her instinct said hug, so she hugged. No hesitation, no fear, no consideration of consequences. And our cubs asked, why did they fall so easily? Pulled up medical scans. I have examined the cubs remotely. Their brain chemistry has been altered. A heavy silence fell over the room. Altered how? Asked quietly. Cubs, like many young mammals, are biologically programmed to respond to nurturing behavior. In normal development, this response is directed at their mothers, but our training suppresses this response. We teach cubs to reject softness, to reject comfort. We build walls in their minds. Pointed to the scans. The human child's affection broke through those walls. When she hugged them, when she pet them, when she showed them unconditional love, their suppressed instincts activated. Their brains began producing bonding chemicals at extremely high levels. Can this be reversed? General asked. Hesitated. I do not believe so. The cubs who experienced human affection have been permanently changed. They now crave human contact. Their brains have been rewired to seek affection. The walls we built are gone forever. The room fell silent again. This was worse than anyone had imagined. Supreme Commander looked at the frozen image of the cubs lying on the floor, purring, being pet by a small human child. He looked at the expressions on their faces. They looked happy, truly happy. He had not seen Young look that happy in a very long time. What do we do now? Someone asked. Did not have an answer. For the first time in his 200 years of life, he did not know what to do. On Harmony's rest, young Bora was watching videos that had sent her, had made the videos herself. They showed her talking about her day, showing her room, introducing her stuffed animals. Bora watched each video multiple times. She purred quietly. She missed the small human. She missed the warmth. She missed the feeling of being loved without having to earn it. For the first time in her life, Bora wondered if being scary was really all that important. 1 year had passed since the incident at Harmony's Rest. 1 year since a 7-year-old human girl had destroyed 3,000 years of carefully built terror. 1 year since the galaxy had learned that the mighty could be defeated with hugs. The galaxy had changed. News traveled fast between stars, and the story of the cubs had traveled fastest of all. Every species had seen the recordings. Every species had watched the fearsome predators melt into purring puddles. Every species had laughed or gasped or simply stared in disbelief. They were still feared. Their warriors were still deadly. Their ships were still powerful. No species was foolish enough to challenge them in actual combat, but something had shifted. The mystery was gone. The myth had cracked. And it was all because of a little girl named. On Prime, the military leaders had debated for months about what to do. Some wanted to pretend the incident never happened. Some wanted to ban all contact with humans. Some even suggested extreme measures that were quickly rejected. In the end, it was Elder who proposed the solution that nobody expected. "We cannot undo what has happened," told the Supreme Commander. "The cubs have changed. They crave human contact. Denying them this will only cause pain, and pain leads to weakness, not strength." "What do you suggest?" asked. Took a deep breath. He was about to say something that went against everything he had believed for 200 years. "I suggest we embrace it." The room had erupted in shock and anger, but had continued speaking. "The humans see us differently than other species. They are not afraid of us. They want to be close to us. This is not a weakness we can fight, but perhaps it is a strength we can use." And so, the Human Cultural Exchange Program was born. Now, 1 year later, the program had grown beyond anyone's expectations. Human families brought their children to meet cubs. Families sent their cubs to visit human worlds. What had started as a diplomatic experiment had become the most successful peace initiative in galactic history. On Harmony's Rest, a new batch of cubs was arriving. There were 15 of them this time, all young, all fresh from their training on Prime. They wore ceremonial armor. Their fur was brushed perfectly. Their eyes glowed with practiced intensity. They had spent months perfecting their predator stares. Elder waited for them in the diplomatic hall. He no longer looked defeated. He stood tall and proud, but there was something softer in his eyes now. He had spent the last year watching cubs and human children form bonds. He had seen something he never thought possible, younglings who were both fierce warriors and loving friends. Beside stood Bora. She was no longer a cub. She had grown into a young adult warrior, tall and strong and beautiful. Her black fur gleamed. Her amber eyes burned bright. She looked every bit the deadly predator she had been trained to be. But on her shoulders sat a small human girl. Was 8 years old now. Her hair was still messy. Her smile was still bright. She had refused to leave Bora's side for more than a few days at a time. Ambassador Jinnah had eventually given up trying to separate them. The bond between the warrior and the human child was too strong to break. "Are they here yet? Are they here yet?" bounced excitedly on Bora's shoulders. "Soon, little one," Bora rumbled. Her voice was deep and warm. "Be patient." "I'm not good at patient," admitted. "I know." Stood nearby, also fully grown now. He had become one of the program's main coordinators. His predator stare had never fully recovered from that first encounter with, but he had found something better: purpose. He helped match cubs with human families. He made sure everyone was safe and happy. He was still a warrior, but now he protected with love as much as with claws. The airlock doors opened. The 15 new cubs marched forward. Their formation was perfect. Their stares were intense. They looked terrifying. Behind them came their instructor, Warrior. His expression was complicated. He had watched his original 12 cubs transform over the past year. Part of him still mourned the loss of their fierce training. But another part of him, a part he rarely admitted existed, was proud of what they had become. "Welcome to your first lesson," announced to the new cubs. His voice carried across the hall with ancient authority. The cubs straightened even more, trying to look impressive. Then the doors on the other side of the hall opened. Human children of various ages came running through. They had been waiting on the other side, barely contained by their parents and teachers. Now they were free. "Kittis," the children screamed in unison. The new cubs' eyes went wide. They had heard stories about what happened here. They had been warned. They had promised themselves they would be strong. They would not fall like the others. But a wave of small humans was rushing toward them. Tiny hands reached out. Bright eyes sparkled with joy. Voices called out about fluffiness and softness and pretty eyes. "Resistance is futile," said calmly. The first human child reached the first cub. A small boy named Minu grabbed a female cub named around the waist and squeezed. "You're so warm," he shouted happily. Tried to maintain her stare. She really tried. But the small human was hugging her so tight, and his arms were so warm, and he smelled like cookies, and she started purring. One by one, the new cubs fell. Just like the first 12 had fallen. Just like every batch of cubs had fallen since the program began. Humans were simply too powerful. Their affection was an unstoppable force. Young Bora watched with amusement from across the hall. She remembered being in their position. She remembered the confusion and shock. She remembered thinking her life was over. But her life had not ended. It had changed. It had become something she never expected, something better. Tugged on Bora's ear. "That one looks extra fluffy," she said, pointing at a particularly poofy cub who was being hugged by 3 human children at once. "Do you want to go meet them?" Bora asked. "Nope," snuggled deeper into Bora's neck fur. "I already have the best fluffy friend. Everyone else is just extra." Bora's purr rumbled deep in her chest. After a year, she no longer felt shame about purring. She had learned that showing love was not weakness. True strength was being brave enough to be soft. Later that day, there was a reception to celebrate the new exchange group. Diplomats from many species attended. The hall was filled with the sound of purring cubs and laughing children. Ambassador Jinnah raised a glass. She had become the official human coordinator for the program. Her daughter's accident had accidentally created the most important diplomatic relationship in galactic history. She still did not fully understand how it had happened. "To humanity's greatest weapon," Jinnah announced with a smile. Across from her stood Warrior, a massive female with battle scars across her muzzle and arms that could crush metal. In her arms, a human toddler was sleeping peacefully, tiny hands wrapped around one of his fingers. Lifted her own glass. Her face was the most serious expression possible for someone holding a sleeping baby. "To belly rubs," she said solemnly. The crowd laughed and cheered and drank. Elder watched from the corner of the room. He was too old to drink much anymore, but he watched everything with his ancient eyes. He saw warriors sitting on the floor, letting children climb all over them. He saw human adults nervously petting fully grown and being surprised by how soft the fur was. He saw bonds forming everywhere he looked. 3,000 years of reputation, destroyed by a child's love. But perhaps, thought, something better had been built in its place. He felt a small tug on his robe. He looked down. A tiny human girl, maybe 4 years old, was looking up at him. She had big eyes and a shy smile. "Can I hug you?" she asked quietly. "You look like you need one." Was the oldest living. He had fought in wars before this child's great-grandparents were born. He had killed more enemies than he could count. He was a legend among his people. He slowly knelt down. His old joints complained. His gray fur fell around him like a cloak. "Yes," he said softly, "I think perhaps I do." The small human wrapped her arms around his neck. She squeezed tight. She was warm and small and smelled like strawberries. Elder Terror of 1,000 Battles closed his eyes and began to purr. The end.